Welcome to today's deep dive. We have this deeply ingrained cultural obsession with the idea of the private home being like a sanctuary.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right. Just think about walking through a residential neighborhood at dusk. You see a house with a perfectly manicured lawn, maybe a couple of bikes on the porch.
A warm golden light glowing from the living room window.
Exactly. From the sidewalk, it just looks like the ultimate safe haven. We are fundamentally conditioned to look at that closed front door and assume that whatever is happening behind it is stable, secure, and peaceful.
It's a really comforting assumption to make. We rely heavily on those external markers of normalcy.
Yeah, the visual shorthand.
Right. When the exterior is maintained, when the lawn is mowed and the curtains are drawn, we kind of give ourselves permission to walk right by without asking any uncomfortable questions. We accept that shorthand for safety because the alternative is just, well, it's deeply unsettling to contemplate.
Which brings us to the core of today's deep dive. Because today, we are stepping right past that visual shorthand and walking straight through that closed front door.
We really are.
We are unpacking a profoundly moving piece of audio source material today. It's a lyrical track titled simply Suffering in Silence.
It's a heavy one, but so important.
It is. And our mission for you today is to decode the psychological architecture of domestic violence that this track exposes. We're going to explore the mechanics of how abuse hides in plain sight, the invisible toll it takes on the developing brains of children, and ultimately why the responsibility to stop it doesn't belong to the victim.
It belongs to the rest of us on the sidewalk.
Exactly. So to understand this trap, the track really gives us a sophisticated psychological portrait.
It doesn't just describe the violence, it dissects the environment that allows the violence to continue. To understand it, we really have to look at the performative aspect of survival that the lyrics introduce right away.
Let's start exactly there, because the track introduces us to a victim, referred to as M, and immediately highlights this agonizing split between her public performance and her private reality.
Right, the contrast is stark.
The lyrics state that she hides the bruises with a smile every day and tells the world she is fine, even though the underlying pain is just constant.
Yeah.
We often hear about victims hiding their abuse, but framing it as a daily active performance feels incredibly exhausting. It's like living a hostage situation while simultaneously acting as the PR representative for your captors.
That is a highly accurate way to look at it, actually. The smile isn't just a cover-up. It is a meticulously maintained survival mechanism.
It's trying to keep everything level.
Exactly. In a domestic abuse dynamic, the abuser's primary goal is control. If the outside world gets a glimpse of the reality, that control is threatened.
So the victim learns, often through severe escalation, that maintaining the public facade of a happy home is the only way to keep the peace.
Right. The "I'm fine" is armor. It's a calculated boundary designed to keep outsiders away, because outside intervention usually means acute danger for the victim once that front door closes again.
The track paints this vivid picture of the cyclical nature of that danger, too. It describes shouts echoing late at night, the physical violence, and then it immediately juxtaposes that with the abuser's reaction.
The apology.
Yes, the lyrics tell us. He says, "I'm sorry after every fight." And I want to pause here for a second because this is where it gets incredibly murky.
It really does.
It is so easy for us sitting comfortably on the outside to listen to that and say, well, obviously the apology's a lie. It's just another tool of control.
Sure. Logically, we know that.
But I have to imagine that in the moment, when your nervous system is absolutely fried and you are terrified, hearing the words, "I'm sorry," feels like a genuine lifeline. How is a victim supposed to distinguish a real apology from a manipulation tactic when they are just, desperate for the fighting to stop?
That is the exact friction point that keeps the cycle spinning. You are touching on the neurology of trauma bonding there.
Oh, wow. The neurology.
Yeah, in a state of prolonged terror, the human brain is just flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. The amygdala, which is our threat detection center, is essentially screaming.
Just pure panic mode.
Pure panic. So when the abuser suddenly shifts from being the source of mortal terror to being the source of comfort, maybe offering an apology, showing affection, the victim's brain experiences a massive release of dopamine and oxytocin.
Oh my gosh, so it's a chemical reaction.
It is. The relief is chemically intoxicating. The apology doesn't even have to be objectively genuine. It just has to signal that the immediate threat has passed.
So the apology acts less like a real resolution and more like a pressure valve.
A pressure valve is the perfect metaphor.
It releases just enough steam so the whole system doesn't explode, which then allows the abuser to just keep the heat turned up indefinitely.
Exactly. The abuser realizes they have pushed the victim to the absolute brink, maybe to the point where they might actually leave or call for help.
Mm.
So the "I'm sorry" is deployed specifically to dial the pressure back from the red zone.
But it never turns the heat off.
Never. And the track is fascinating because it actively rejects this biological trap.
Hmm.
It provides a direct rebuttal to the abuser's pressure valve, explicitly stating that broken hearts do not heal overnight.
Right, and noting that a home should be a place where anger leaves. It argues that love shouldn't leave you in tears.
It's systematically stripping the power away from that hollow apology.
It's demanding that the listener look past the temporary relief and recognize the underlying pattern. Which makes total sense, because once we understand how the adults are caught in this pressure valve cycle, we really have to look at the collateral damage.
The children.
Yes. The track refuses to let us ignore the other people living inside that pressure cooker.
And the inclusion of the children in this narrative is so vital. Domestic violence is not an isolated event between two partners. It is an ecosystem that infects everyone breathing the air inside that house.
The track points out that the children hear the shouting late at night, living in just a constant state of fear.
Right.
And here is where the lyrics draw a contrast that completely stopped me in my tracks. Earlier, we talked about the victim, M, who hides her bruises with a smile. She can put on makeup, she can perform that suburban facade.
The PR rep, like you said.
Exactly. But when the track shifts to the kids, it says children grow with wounds they cannot hide.
That line is devastating.
It really is. And I want you, the listener, to think about this for a second. Think about the kids your own children play with, or the students you see waiting at the bus stop. We are so conditioned to look for obvious cinematic signs of abuse, like a black eye. But what does an unhideable wound actually look like on a random Tuesday afternoon?
Well, it looks like a fundamental alteration of the child's nervous system.
Oh.
Yeah. When the track says they grow with wounds they cannot hide, it is referring to the developmental scars of complex trauma. A child growing up in an environment where the adults, the very people who are biologically supposed to protect them, are locked in a cycle of unpredictable violence.
They just never learn what baseline safety feels like.
Exactly. Their brain wires itself for constant threat detection.
So their internal alarm system is just stuck in the on position all the time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And you can't hide a broken alarm system. To the outside observer, these unhideable wounds often look like profound behavioral extremes.
Like what, specifically?
It might be the child who is hypervigilant, flinching when someone drops a book in the classroom, or might manifest as aggressive behavior because they have learned that dominance is the only way to avoid victimization.
Oh, wow.
Or, conversely, it might look like extreme fawning. That's the child who is overly compliant, just desperate to please every adult around them to ensure they don't trigger an outburst.
The physical bruises might heal, but as the track says, these scars may stay for many years, born from anger, hurt, and tears.
They're literally growing around the trauma. The architecture of their personality is being built on a foundation of ambient terror.
And while the kids are displaying these systemic, unhideable wounds to the world, the victim is trapped in a completely different kind of silence. The track makes this really profound observation about why the victim stays quiet.
Yeah, it says, some people suffer and stay silent inside, too afraid and ashamed to cry.
We've talked about the fear, obviously, the very real physical danger of speaking up, but the track places equal weight on being ashamed to cry. I keep getting stuck on that word. Why ashamed?
It's a great question.
I mean, they are the victim of a crime. We don't expect someone who got mugged on the street to feel ashamed of it. Why is shame such a defining feature of this specific type of violence?
Because domestic violence is deeply intimate, and it relies heavily on the systemic dismantling of the victim's reality, which is a process we commonly call gaslighting. An abuser rarely just hits their partner. They spend months or years meticulously convincing their partner that the abuse is their own fault.
Always twisting the narrative.
Exactly. So the victim's behavior is always framed as the catalyst for the abuser's violence. Like, if you had an overcooked dinner, I wouldn't have had to yell. If you were just a better partner, I wouldn't lose my temper.
So the abuser makes the victim complicit in their own mind. They outsource the justification of the violence to the person receiving it.
That is the insidious genius of it, honestly.
Yeah.
The victim internalizes this distorted reality. They begin to believe that the abuse is not a crime committed against them, but rather a reflection of their own personal failure.
They think if I were smarter or more capable, I could just fix this.
And that creates a profound sense of shame. And as we know, shame thrives in isolation. If you feel fundamentally broken and responsible for the nightmare you were living in, the very last thing you want to do is invite your neighbors or coworkers into that reality.
It effectively means the abuser doesn't even need to be in the room to keep the victim quiet. The internalized shame acts as the ultimate silencer. It builds the walls of the cell.
It really does.
But the track offers a devastatingly clear warning about this. It tells the listener point blank, silence only keeps the hurt alive. It actively refutes the victim's desperate hope that staying quiet will eventually buy them safety.
It shatters the illusion of the hostage PR representative. The track insists that the silence doesn't protect the victim at all. It protects the environment where the abuser thrives.
And it's this exact realization that forces the source material to pivot. It moves from diagnosing the pathology of the abuse to demanding a cure.
And it starts that process by fundamentally redefining what love is.
This part of the track is incredibly powerful because it strips away all the romanticized confusion. It goes back to basics. It defines true love as patient and kind. But more importantly, it gives a very specific list of what love is not. It says love is not control of someone's life. It is not to slap, not cruel words. And then it uses a phrase that I think captures the true horror of domestic violence better than almost anything else. It says love is not making someone feel less human.
That phrase, less human, that is the philosophical core of the track right there. It elevates the conversation beyond just physical battery.
It really does, because when you talk about making someone feel less human, you are talking about existential erasure.
Exactly.
The slap is terrible, obviously, but the slap is just the physical punctuation mark at the end of a long sentence of psychological destruction. The constant control, the cruel words, the isolation, it all serves to chip away at the victim's humanity until they view themselves not as an autonomous person with rights and desires, but merely as an object to be managed in the abuser's life.
It is identity theft on a soul level.
Identity theft on a soul level.
Wow. And by framing it as a loss of humanity, the track makes it clear that we are dealing with a life or death scenario, even if the physical violence hasn't reached a lethal threshold yet. The psychological death has already occurred.
Which explains why the track issues such an urgent, massive call to action.
Right, because it realizes that a person who has been systematically drained of their humanity, who is paralyzed by fear and suffocating under a blanket of manufactured shame, simply does not have the capacity to save themselves.
So the track turns its attention away from the victim and points directly at the listener.
It points at the bystander.
It says, if you see the signs, don't look away, speak the truth and help today. And frankly, this is the part that makes people the most uncomfortable. We are deeply socialized to just mind our own business.
We really are.
If we hear a couple screaming at each other next door, our first instinct is usually to turn up the TV and tell ourselves, oh, it's just a marital dispute. They wouldn't want me interfering. I mean, isn't it genuinely dangerous or at least wildly inappropriate to inject yourself into a stranger's or even a friend's private relationship?
It is uncomfortable, absolutely. And there are certainly safe and unsafe ways to intervene, which usually involves consulting professionals rather than, kicking down doors yourself.
Yeah.
But the psychological concept at play here is the bystander effect. We diffuse responsibility, assuming someone else will handle it, or we rely on that societal norm of privacy to excuse our inaction. But the track is arguing that our adherence to politeness is exactly what the abuser is banking on.
The abuser is weaponizing our good manners.
Exactly. The abuser relies on the community looking the other way. When the track says, raise your voice, let the world see, it is telling us that simply acknowledging the reality of the situation is a radical intervention.
Because the abuser's greatest weapon is isolation.
Right. And the victim's internalized shame. When a bystander steps in, even just by checking on the victim privately, saying, I heard what happened, I see you, and this isn't your fault, they are puncturing the abuser's distorted reality.
They are providing empirical proof to the victim that they are not crazy and they are not alone.
The track actually frames that intervention in the most dramatic terms possible, too. It tells the listener that their intervention, even just one small step, can literally bring somebody back to life.
And that connects so beautifully back to the idea of existential erasure. If the abuse is designed to erase their identity and make them feel less human, then the act of a bystander stepping in, seeing them, and offering true kindness is the act of restoring their humanity.
It is literally resurrecting their spirit. It shifts the burden of resolution from the isolated individual to the collective community.
And the track is very deliberate in making sure we understand that this community includes everyone. As it draws to a close, it states that hands are meant to help, not harm, and specifies that every man, deserves safe and caring hands.
I find that shift so interesting. It starts off hyper-focused on this one woman, M, hiding her bruises. But by the end, it expands the lens completely. Every woman, every man.
It refuses to gender the vulnerability in its final plea.
Yes, it serves as this stark reminder that anyone, regardless of how strong or successful they appear on the outside, can find themselves caught in this psychological trap.
It universalizes the mandate for empathy. Domestic violence does not discriminate by gender, tax bracket, or zip code.
It can happen in the apartment complex downtown, and it can happen in that pristine suburban house with the glowing windows we talked about earlier.
The need for protection and calm is a fundamental human right, and the lyrics insist that teaching the world what true kindness looks like requires active participation, not just passive observation.
Which means we cannot just be passive consumers of this analysis today. We have to take these insights out of our headphones and into the real world.
Suffering in Silence is a masterful breakdown of how the mechanics of domestic abuse function. But ultimately, it is a plea for collective vigilance. It is begging us to stop accepting the visual shorthand of a happy exterior and to start paying attention to the intricate, often uncomfortable realities of the people around us.
It forces us to reconcile the public facade with the private reality and gives us the vocabulary to understand why the victim can't just walk away.
And that is exactly why this deep dive matters directly to you listening right now. The signs of someone trapped in this cycle, someone accepting a hollow pressure valve apology or hiding the psychological destruction of cruel words behind a forced smile, might be happening right next door.
Or you might see a child displaying those unhideable wounds of hypervigilance at your local grocery store.
Recognizing that hands are meant to help, not harm, empowers you to be the person who decides to break the social contract of politeness. It gives you the agency to be the one who refuses to look away.
The mandate is to speak the truth, because relying on the victim to break their own silence while drowning in shame is a failure of community.
So as you go about your day, pass by those houses with the perfectly manicured lawns and interact with your coworkers and friends, I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on.
The track emphasizes over and over that silence keeps the hurt alive within the walls of the home.
Right. But let's look at ourselves. What if our broader societal silence, our deep-seated reluctance to have these uncomfortable conversations, our fierce defense of privacy, and our desire to just mind our own business, what if that is the very soil that allows these hidden cycles of abuse to take root in the first place? Are our polite boundaries actually providing the camouflage that abusers need to operate? Until next time, keep looking deeper.